Welcome back. Today I'm going to take you through the results of the second annual Fry Family Christmas Chess Tournament, which is just something that my household and I do with each other for 2 Christmases in a row now that all 4 of us know how to play chess. If you're new here, I'm not a titled player, I'm not a chess coach, I'm just a random person trying to get better at chess. Usually I do as deep of an analysis as I can on every game, but these games were just for fun. So hopefully you'll stick with me and see what happened. We did make a few changes from last year's tournament. Not that very many of you are familiar with that because I think only 14 people watched the video a year ago. And it's not that good because I didn't even have a webcam then. But one thing we changed was instead of 10-minute rapid games, we did 10 plus 5. Second, instead of playing these games over the board and then me writing down every move by hand and putting them in PGN files and uploading them for analysis, we skipped some of those steps and we just played these on the chess.com app this time. A third change that we made was instead of having a second round no matter what, we just decided ahead of time that if somebody was clearly in the lead at the end of the first round, we would just call it finished. And the fourth change we made was that in every game, the youngest player involved got to choose their color. I think that's the entire introduction, so let's just take a look at these games. All right, the first game was between my wife and I. She, being the youngest player involved in this game, chose the white pieces. She opened with d4, perhaps because she's heard that I do that a lot. So I opened with the knight to f6, which is the Indian game. I don't know that that's great, moving the c-pawn just there, but I do know that I usually play e6 on my second move and bring the bishop out, because very often that pawn has gone all the way to c4 and the knight goes there. I wasn't sure what to do about that, so I played e6 anyway. Oh, there's my arrows from the last time I looked at this. Okay. My wife played e4 here, which I didn't immediately notice that I could just take it. That shows that I still need some practice here. But I did think if this pawn advanced, of course, I could put my knight over there on d5. I went ahead and played c5 here. Me playing c5 was a mistake, giving the advantage back to my wife. My wife gave the advantage back to me by playing f4, which was not good at all. Of course, I can still take this pawn now. But instead of doing that, I took the center pawn with my c-pawn, which I don't think is horrible. I still have a very slight advantage here, but it wasn't my best move in the situation. And of course, she took back with the pawn, but that was a mistake. Not sure exactly why that was a mistake, because the number jumped to 1.4. What does the line say I should do here? Okay, now I should take this pawn. Did I finally see that? Okay, I did finally see that. Here she's supposed to get this knight out, but instead she got that knight out, challenging this knight. I didn't see exactly why it's a mistake. If you can see the lines here, you can see that the computer is saying I should now check queen to h4. I think that's because there's only one way to block that check. Obviously the king could move forward 1 square, but then I could come in this way. So I think if I had checked here on queen to h4, they would have to play g3, and then I would take that with my knight. And then if she took back, then I would take the rook. But that's not what happened. I just went ahead and took her knight, which was my second mistake of the game. By the way, according to the game review, neither one of us had a blunder in this game. So she took that. I pushed my d-pawn in order to develop some more pieces. And I did develop some pieces. I castled. And my wife gave up the rook for a bishop, which I don't think is ideal. So if you're new at chess and haven't yet learned the point values of the pieces, let that be a lesson to you. Rooks are generally worth more than bishops or knights. Depending on the point system you use, usually they're 5 points, rooks are, whereas bishop and knights are typically counted as 3 points apiece. I don't know if my wife knew that, but she put her bishop in a position where I could immediately attack it and then traded it for a pawn, which is definitely not good. Perhaps she wasn't sure what else to do at this point. And I felt like I was getting stuck here, and I probably shouldn't have put my queen there, because then I have very few places I can put it, and I can't move this knight. I knew I was in the lead here, I just wasn't sure exactly how to finish off this game. However, I decided to check here, and she took with the rook, which allowed me to take the rook, and I was now up 8 points in material. So it was a matter of ending this game, which again, I wasn't sure exactly how to do. My rook is trapped because I can't get this knight out. So I had to figure out a way to get that rook out. And she gave up her queen, of course, and it turned out that I was able to get my knight and rook out when my wife gave up her bishop there. And then I went this way in order to checkmate there with my queen on move 28. Let's go to the second game now. The second game was between my daughter playing with the white pieces and my wife playing with the black pieces. This game had a total of 20 combined blunders, according to the game review. We're just going to go to the point at which the evaluation bar begins to jump, and we'll see what those blunders were. Okay. All right, here after about 25 moves, my wife has a slight advantage of minus 0.6, and my daughter is falling behind. As you might have seen as I sped through those last several moves, my daughter had a pretty sizable advantage at several points, but by this point has given it away. And I skipped over to the game review to find this exact point because there are several blunders in a row here. The Stockfish Lines says that my wife should play rook to g2 check at this point. But I don't know. I think I would be tempted to take that pawn. And that says that's her third best move. And the reason I would be tempted to take that is because it's one square from promoting. Instead of getting out of the way with the knight, which is what she did, not only does this allow promotion, which you wouldn't do just yet because the knight is still guarding that spot, but it just gives up this knight. But my daughter didn't see that. So even though she's now has a plus 14 advantage, you have to see that plus 14 advantage, and you have to know why you have it. Not only would she have gone up that extra knight, but then this newly formed f-pawn would be protecting the g-pawn, which is about to promote. But instead, my daughter brought this rook down here. And I think her idea was, now this brings back to even if you're looking at the eval bar. I'm pretty sure her idea was to protect this square. That had to have been why she brought the rook down there, because she wanted to promote the g-pawn. The problem is that rook isn't enough protection for that square because both the knight and the rook are guarding that. I don't think she noticed that the rook is guarding that square because it's currently not able to get to that square. But if you move this pawn forward and promote, then the black rook will be able to see that square. So anyway, that's why that took him back to even. What my wife should have played here is knight to e4 check. Wow, knight to e4 check. That would have gotten the knight out of danger, and it would have forced a response from my daughter. But instead, she took that pawn with her rook. Well, it looked like it was unprotected, but that still loses this knight. And that's the only good move in this position for my daughter, is to take that knight. But instead, she took the rook over here to threaten this pawn. That gives a huge advantage to my wife, who needs to bring this rook back and check the king here, or a number of other moves that are just fine, including still being able to play this knight check here. But instead, she pushed a pawn, which gives a slight advantage back to my daughter. Best move in this situation is to go here, which wins the rook. So my daughter definitely should have played rook to a7 check, and then when the king got out of check, whichever way that it got out of check, because it does have to move to one of those 6 squares at that point, then my daughter would have won this rook outright and still been able to catch this advancing f-pawn. But instead, she took the knight. 3 or 4, maybe however many moves it is later, she finally saw that she could take that knight. Of course, she did go up a piece there and is threatening the rook, but now it's back to even. And of course, my wife needs to come back here and check. She did. She saw it this time. And it's protected by the rook. It's still dead even. My daughter hasn't lost yet. But she needs to play king to e3, king to d3, or king to e1. And there might be some other moves that still maintain a sense of equality here. I think if it were me, I would definitely play king to e1 here. And my reasoning would be that if this pawn then advanced, I could get in front of it, and I would be threatening the rook. The rook would have to move over to protect itself and still protect the pawn. But then it can't come down, or I can win that pawn. My daughter played king to c3, which gives away everything. As you saw, the evaluation bar dropped nearly out of sight. My wife now has a minus 66.5 advantage. This is, of course, because there's now no way to stop the promotion of this pawn. The only move that maintains the advantage for black here, but my wife went over here to get this pawn. Oh, my daughter now has a mate in 17. Oh my. It says f7 is the way to go here. That's the closest way to promotion. I think I would have been tempted to take this pawn at this point. Let's see what she did. She moved her king, which gives my wife a huge advantage. I honestly can't explain that move, except that she thought my wife was about to take this pawn, which would be check, and so she was preemptively getting out of check. Having moved her f-pawn all the way down this far, she forgot about it. Forgot that she's 2 squares from promotion here. So if she had moved it forward, And then if my wife had taken this pawn, it would have been a fairly simple matter to get out of check there, and then she could have promoted on the very next turn. But instead, she played here, so now my wife has a huge advantage. The biggest advantage is if she plays f2 now, because she's only 2 squares from promotion. Another plan would have been to take here. I honestly don't understand why taking this pawn would have been so bad. So maybe I would have lost this game at this point too. And that's what my wife played, was taking that pawn. But that gives a mating sequence back to my daughter. And again, now I understand. It is definitely because of this pawn push here. But she didn't do it. She moved her king, which gives the huge advantage back to my wife, who now needs to push this pawn. These two f-pawns are each 2 squares from promotion, and both players have temporarily forgotten about them, worrying about checks. Now, I will give my daughter credit here. She did remember, because she said it as she played this king move. She said opposition. That means she remembered what I taught her about when the kings are facing each other across 3 empty squares, that's what is called the opposition. And perhaps she thought here that because she has the opposition, that on her next turn she could check and drive that king back. Maybe that's what she was working on. But she did remember this because she said it out loud, and it turns out to not be a great move. For one thing, my wife can now push this pawn or check, and both of those turn out to be really good moves. My wife found one of them. Well, that ruins the opposition because now this white king has to move off of those 3 squares. My daughter picked king to e5, which maintains a huge advantage for the player with the black pieces, who needs to push this f-pawn now. But instead she pushed the a-pawn, which gives a huge advantage back to my daughter, who needs to push this f-pawn. Did she push it? She did. She remembered to push the f-pawn. Okay. Well, my wife played this pawn, which now gives my daughter a mate in 8. She needs to promote now, which she did. But then my wife promoted. Okay, well that one's fairly easy taken care of. It is check, so you do have to respond to it. Just take it with a rook. But my daughter, after trying to move her queen for a couple of times, realized she was in check, didn't see that the rook could capture the queen, and moved the king out of check, which of course gives a mating sequence back to my wife, who played there, which gives a mating sequence back to my daughter because, again, the rook can just take it. Did my daughter see it? Yes. So now my daughter has a mate in 6. I'm very proud of her. She has actually asked me a few questions about chess during the year, so perhaps she's improved. My wife played there. It's now mate in 4. I think we need to go here. I probably would have been tempted to check here with the queen. Stockfish says rook to a7 is the best move here. Instead, my daughter went down here, and that brings the game evaluation back to zeros. I think what she was thinking is she was worried about this pawn promoting. So she went down here to guard against that. Rook to f3 check is actually the best move on my wife's part because it wins the queen. And I don't know if she saw that when she played it or if she was just looking for checks. But she played it, king moves out of check, and she did not take the queen. I can see why she would have under-promoted here, because it doesn't matter if the rook's just going to capture it. But I think I'm pretty sure she should have just taken the queen there, because now the queen can take the rook, which my daughter did. So that was a pretty good move. My daughter now has a mate in 3, and after that has a mate in 2. But my daughter played there. Maybe she was thinking of the ladder mate, where the queen and the rook alternate ranks as they push the king back. But she still has a mate in 2. My daughter brought the knight up, my wife brought the knight up, which turned out to be one of the better moves here. And I don't know what that move was supposed to be, because now you're still at a mate in 3. But anyway, my wife challenged the queen with the knight. So my daughter went down there to get out of danger, but now she's pushed herself back to a mate in 6. One tip, if you're a beginner rated around the 300 range, as my daughter is, when you're getting out of danger, like my daughter was here with her queen getting out of danger from the knight, if this is all the pieces that are left on the board, try to find a spot to get out of danger where you're also putting the king in check. And just to back up one move, I'll give a huge tip right here that I would have played queen to e5. That's not actually one of the best moves that's listed here, but that's what I would have played. And the reason is because when the king got out of check, I would have just taken this knight, and then I would never have to worry about it again. My daughter played over there. The knight went down here. You can take it, but you don't have to. You could just go start checking that king because the knight's so far away. It actually turns out to be one of the better moves. And so my daughter took it. And now there's only one legal move left for my wife, and it was there. That's actually checkmate because this is opposition again. And here my daughter did not notice that she was in opposition with the opponent's king, did not notice that this king would not be able to move off of that rank, and that the queen is cutting off all of these. So if the rook went over to e8, it would be checkmate because there would be nowhere left for the king to go. But instead, he played queen to d4, which leaves only one legal move for this king, and that's back where it just was. And she moved there, and that's a stalemate. Another tip, if you're a beginner, a low-rated player, if you end up in games where you have extra queens or rooks all over the board, and the opponent's moves are becoming limited because it is against the rules for the king to move into check, watch for those. Make sure that after you move, that the opponent has a legal move. It doesn't have to be a king move. If the opponent, the player with the black pieces, had a pawn here, they would be forced to move that pawn because the king doesn't have any legal moves. But it would be okay for the player with the white pieces because that pawn could move. But in this case, the king is the only piece that my wife had left. And now there are no legal moves because the queen is cutting off these diagonals, this king is cutting off these squares, and the rook is cutting off all of those. So stalemate. Okay, let's move on to the next game. The next game was between my daughter and I. As you can see from the game review on the right, I had a pretty high cap score here. I didn't have any mistakes or any blunders. And as it turned out, that's because my daughter made a couple of mistakes early in the game. Here, my daughter played an inaccuracy there, and after I took, she did that. Well, that's a blunder because I just win the queen. And so on move 5, I have a 9-point material advantage and a plus 11 evaluation bar advantage, which of course I can't see during the game, but I know that I've won her queen, and from here on out, I'm going to have 9 points of extra material to play with. But after this, almost nothing I do is going to be counted as a blunder unless I just start giving away pieces. I can even sacrifice pieces. I can sacrifice exchanges in order to help clear off the board and use my material advantage to make a huge difference in this game. I went back to my old strategy of CPR, continuous piece removal. As you can see, I just took the rook, even though that might not have been my best move. And this was an inaccuracy on my part. It was the only thing that was counted negatively on my cap score, was that knight move there, which I didn't think was that bad. It checks the king. Is it because it's because I had a mate in one. Where was my mate in one? Was it this bishop out? I'm going to turn on the lines here and see. Oh, either queen or bishop to d3 would have been mate in one. Well, I missed that. That's the only inaccuracy I had in this game, is that I missed mate in one and instead had a mate in 5. But as it turned out, I was able to mate in just 3 more moves and won that game. This was the shortest game of the Fry family, the second annual Fry family Christmas chess tournament. Let's go on to the next game. Okay, this was the 4th game of our tournament, and this time my son was playing with the white pieces against my wife with the black pieces. This game had the highest combined cap score or averaged cap score between both players of the entire tournament, including all of my games. My son had managed an 88.3% here with 0 mistakes, 0 blunders, 0 missed wins, and just 1 inaccuracy. As you can see from the little graph up there, my wife blundered early in this game, and it was, well, that's an inaccuracy there, but the next move was not moving the queen. She moved here to defend the queen with the bishop this way, and my son took advantage of that. It called that a great move, which my son being rated around 400 rapid, that probably is a great move for a 400 rated rapid player. And my wife took back, and this game did not go terribly long. My son, as I did in the previous game where I won a queen early, he recognized that he had a material advantage and just moved to use that material advantage. And my wife did not understand the point values of the pieces and was trying to do trades, but losing on those trades. So my son was able to take advantage of this fairly easily. Now here he gave up a rook for a minor piece, if you saw that, and it turns out to be the best move. I was honestly surprised when he did that, but that's what he did, and it turned out to be the best move at the time. That also turned out to be the best move at the time. I thought he was wrong while I was watching this game. Surprisingly enough, I suggested, in my mind, castling here. And after he made that move, I thought, why didn't he castle? But that turns out to be the best move. And it might be because the rook protects the knight and the king protects the pawn. I don't know. But in either way, it turned out to be the best move. And my wife traded the rook for the knight, leaving very few pieces left. That's an inaccuracy. That was his only inaccuracy of the game, according to the game review. And I'm going to see why that was by going to the analysis window. The game review analysis says he should have played queen to g7 here. I think that's because then moving the rook down would have been made. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Because once the queen is in here, it doesn't matter what the player with the black pieces does, then rook to b8 would be checkmate, no matter what. Pretty sure. Because the queen sitting there would keep that king on the back rank. It would threaten the rook, but it really wouldn't matter. Again, wouldn't matter what the black player did. The rook to b8 would be mate. But he played rook to b8 first, which I thought was fine at the time. He's cleaning up here. He won the rook there with that skewer through the king, which was a pretty good move, even if it wasn't the best. And I like that he didn't worry about this pawn advancing, at least not immediately. He went after the checks. But then he started worrying about the pawn advancing, so he moved his king over, which is fine, and took that pawn out so he didn't have to worry about it anymore, and then started checking. And he does know how to do the ladder mate, but he forgot that this king can hide behind the pawn, which it did. So, had to take care of that. So he started bringing his knight to kick that king out from behind that pawn. Now here what he's doing, he knows that his own king is guarding these two squares, and now that the queen is cutting off these, it forces that king back in there. Even though it wasn't his best move, I do like what he was thinking. And then he brought his king. Forgot all about the knight, because now his king guards these two squares. Fortunately, he did not move this rook over earlier because this king has to be able to have a legal move. He did check for that. I watched him look to see if that king had a legal move. The king did. And then he's forcing the king to one of these three squares by bringing his own king. Again, I was very proud of him for recognizing that his king can become an offensive piece in these situations. So now it is a simple ladder mate. And there's nothing that could be done. And he did learn the ladder mate from me some point during the last year. So that was the fourth game of the tournament. Let's take a look at the very last two. This fifth game was between my son and my daughter, in which my son was playing with the white pieces and my daughter, who is a couple years older, playing with the black pieces. This game had the lowest combined cap score of the entire tournament, and I'm just going to go through the moves without offering much analysis, and I might even speed this up in editing. Was very proud of my daughter here, who took that pawn, knowing that if he took back, she would get this rook. But when he took back, she didn't get the rook. She moved another pawn first, which gives him a huge advantage. He took that pawn, which gives the huge advantage back to her, because he could have taken her rook, but he didn't. And then she still didn't see it. So now he can take her rook, which he didn't do. Now she can take his rook. She finally did it. Now, you'll notice that about the same thing is about to happen on the other side. If she takes this pawn and he takes back, the rooks will be facing each other again. And there it is. She can take his rook. This time she saw it immediately. I don't think he knew that was going to be checkmate when he took the queen. I think he just took the queen. But he might not have recognized, and a lot of beginners might not recognize at this position, that this king doesn't have a lot of choices. For example, before my daughter blocked with the queen, this king couldn't get out of check. It can't come here because the knight guards that spot, and it can't come here because the pawn guards that spot. So it's stuck. The only way out of check is for the queen to block, and the queen can block one of three ways. And in any case, when white captures that queen, it's going to be checkmate. Like I said, I don't think my son recognized that, but my daughter recognized it probably after trying to move the king out of check, that she only had one way to get out of check, and that was to block with the queen, which she eventually did. And then he took it, and it was mate. And I think he was surprised when that was checkmate. There was one final game remaining. If you've been keeping track, my daughter and my wife each have one draw, and they lost the rest of their games. My daughter lost to me. My daughter lost to my wife. No, sorry, my daughter and my wife drew against each other, but my daughter lost to me and lost to my son. I beat my wife and I beat my daughter. And so now my son has 2 wins. He beat my wife, beat my daughter, and I have 2 wins. So the final game was between me and my son, which is now the game that I'm going to show you. This was the final game. My son chose the white pieces once again. I believe he chose white in all 3 of the games he played. I've already forgotten what happened earlier in this video. He opened with e4, which is best by test, he has heard, and I played the Caro-Kann defense. And I think I played it well. Stockfish says I should play e5. Well, I didn't do that. I took that. Is that bad? No, it wasn't the best. Okay. Well, he took back, and I took his queen, and he had to take back, and so we're about even after 5 moves. I played e5 in order to be able to get both my bishops out. He brought that bishop out, and I blocked it. He took it back. He checked. I blocked it. He actually has a slight advantage right now, +1. He took. I took back. I castled queenside because I wanted to be able to move this knight and with a discovered check from this rook, which is what happened. But I wasn't sure how to follow up on that. And it turns out I didn't play the best here. Stockfish says I should play c4 now. I guess I could see that because my knight's also guarding that square. But I got that knight out, and that gave the advantage to my son, who is now up +1.5. So now he's up +2 point something. Okay. Close to even now, but my son is still up, almost +1. Over +1 now. Oh, that was a mistake. It brought it back to zeros. Let's see if we can find the point at which I took charge of this game. Oh, that looks like a mistake. Was it because I could? No, it wasn't because of that. What should I have done instead? Oh, I should have checked here. Knight to d1 check. Well, I didn't see that because that would have forced the king to one of these 2 squares. Can I follow that out for a second? I don't think he would have taken, although Stockfish says that's okay. But if he had taken, then obviously I would have taken back. I would have gone up and exchanged there. But what if he had moved his king here, which it says is his best move? Then it says I can threaten that knight with h5. Well, then wouldn't it? Oh, because now when it moves, I'm just going to win the knight for free. Oh my. So that's why it says not to even move it, or if you do move it, to take this pawn out with it. Okay. Well, I didn't see that, so let's go back to what actually happened. I took that knight, and he didn't take back. And that's where I knew I had won. I'm not sure why he played what he played. But I do want to point out, the clocks aren't visible here. Both of us have more than 10 minutes remaining. We're playing very quickly. And my son was playing so quickly that he didn't lose any time on that move. Just gave me his knight. I waited to check first, and then got my knight out of danger. Both knights protecting each other. So I was pretty proud of that. But I knew I had a slight advantage here that I could just trade out, do any even trades that were available, and continue to work my way in here. I was willing to sacrifice that knight, knowing that his king was just about trapped, and then trade off those because I have a whole extra piece. So it wasn't too difficult to take care of business here, but it was more difficult than it should have been for me. Now, at this point, I was absolutely certain that I would win once my son gave up his rook here, but he went ahead and waited a couple of more moves to see if I would actually promote, and when I did, he resigned. This game tied for the longest game of the tournament. It tied with the game in which my wife and daughter drew. So anyway, hopefully something in there was of interest to you. If not, I will be back in just a day or two with a more normal chess video, either analyzing my games or solving puzzles. I might even throw in a video with some New Year's resolutions for 2023, because that's just around the corner. Not personal New Year's resolutions, because you don't need to know about all that, but New Year's resolutions for my chess journey or goals for this channel, that sort of thing. Trying to roll those ideas around in my head and get that out in a few days as well. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great 2023, and we'll see you next time.